Hello, investors. Welcome to My Two Fills podcast, the show that helps you grow wealth, create passive income, and achieve your financial goals faster. I am your host, Damodar Mata, author, blogger, and financial advisor in Dubai. This is a weekly market update as of 17th January 2022. Tune in every week for news, views, and market moves. Let's move on to the show. The title of today's episode is A Bumpy Ride. In this episode, we will discuss last week's market action, the highest inflation number in the last 40 years, and we will estimate the number of interest rate hikes by the Fed in 2022 in an attempt to tame inflation. We will talk about the lone green spot in a sea of red, and we will look at the outlook for the month January and beyond. Last week, the US equities were in the red for the second week in a row. The Dow Jones Industrial Average fell by 0.9%, while the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq fell by 0.3%. The YTD numbers for US indices were as follows: Dow Jones minus 1.2%, the S&P 500 minus 2.2%, while the Nasdaq has fallen the most at minus 4.8%. The markets continue to wrestle Fed's aggressive stance as the inflation in the US continued to surge, hitting the 7% mark, the highest since 1982. Persisting high inflation adversely impacts many economic aspects such as Fed's monetary policy, consumer confidence and spending, liquidity, and bond yields. They in turn restrict the growth of equities, particularly the growth stocks. Given the recent data and developments, the markets are slowly pricing in at least 4 interest rate hikes in 2022 as the Fed is looking to tame the surging inflation. Additionally, investors were also served with a disappointing dose of economic data in the form of a sharp decline in December's retail sales numbers, both online and in stores, deteriorating consumer sentiment, and a dip in industrial production. We discussed in the last week's episode how the consumer confidence numbers were down, and that is reflecting in a decline in the December's retail sales numbers as well. On a positive note, the earnings season starting next week is expected to be good and will likely support the markets in the short run. However, it remains to be seen how much of the inflation were the corporates able to pass on to the consumers, and how long will they be able to continue to do so without losing revenue. In light of the above, we could expect a bumpy ride throughout 2022 as both the bulls and the bears battle to take control. 2022 is perhaps the year you should focus less on the return on your capital and more on the return of your capital. Moving on to Europe. European equities were also in the red as negative sentiments from Fed's monetary policy spilled over US into Europe. However, UK's FTSE was up the second week in a row, supported by positive data on the economy's expansion. Moving further east into India and China. Chinese equities continue to slide from last year into January and in the last week as Chinese markets struggle with the real estate crisis, and the investor confidence is still low due to regulatory clampdowns. The Shanghai Composite Index was down by 1.6%, while the CSI 300 Index was down by 2%. Indian equities were the bright green spot in a sea of red as Nifty crossed the 18,000 mark and the Sensex regained the 61,000 levels. Indian equities witnessed a positive movement across market caps as both FIIs and domestic investors were on a buying spree. Outlook: cautious yet positive. As stated above, investors should brace for a bumpy ride in 2022 as Fed continues to tighten its monetary policy. A lot depends on the Q4 corporate earnings and the guidelines for Q1 and beyond. Despite all challenges, global economies are still growing at a healthy pace, and the outlook for equities is still cautiously positive. A diversified portfolio with growth and value stocks blended with bonds, commodities, and more importantly, cash can help investors ride out the volatility with little or no damage. This was weekly market update as of 17th January 2022. I hope you found it engaging and valuable. Let me know what your thoughts are, and also let me know if you have any suggestions to improve the content and delivery. Please don't let me be your best kept secret. Share my podcast with your friends, family, and with your online network. You were listening to my Two Fills podcast. I'm Damodar Mata. Until next week, stay safe, stay invested.